Thanks for tuning in today for our program, The Myth of Study Drugs, the problem of prescription stimulant misuse. I'm Stan Rhodes. You probably have heard about performance-enhancing drugs in sports, but how much do you know about the drugs some people think could enhance academic performance? Well, the myth of so-called study drugs could be dangerous. And we're talking about medications doctors use to treat Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder, known as ADHD. The misuse of these prescription stimulants is part of the bigger problem of prescription drug abuse. And add on to that, the notion that pills must be safe because a doctor prescribed them to someone. Well, three people are with me today to talk about this issue, and each brings a different perspective to the discussion. First, Dr. Amelia Aria is a researcher and director of the Center on Young Adult Health and Development at the University of Maryland School of Public Health. She has spent years studying the behaviors of college students. Dr. Mark Fishman is an addiction psychiatrist and is the medical director of Maryland Treatment Centers. He works primarily with young people who are in treatment or recovery. And Steve Preserve is the president and CEO of the partnership at drugfree.org, the nation's largest nonprofit organization dedicated to evidence-based solutions to adolescent substance use disorders. Well, welcome to everyone. Let's start with the basics. Let's go back and define what the problem is. Study drugs, what are we talking about? This is something relatively new. Who wants to start?
It really is, as you said, an outgrowth of the prescription drug abuse problem that young people and parents alike in this case look out at all of those different products out there and say, are some of these able to make my life better? And in the case of the myth that has risen up around study drugs is this belief that somehow if I take these products that are legitimately prescribed for other people, they must somehow give me an edge. And throughout the whole issue of prescription drug abuse, we see that constant thing. FDA approved, doctor prescribed, must be safe. And that's where the mistakes really begin.
So it is a misnomer. Are all ADHD drugs the same, ADHD drugs the same way?
Well, they're not all the same, but they do share similar characteristics, similar profiles, both in their advantages and their side effect disadvantages. When used responsibly under the supervision of medical monitoring for appropriate indications, ADHD, other conditions, they're relatively safe, but they need intensive monitoring because they certainly have side effects. Even when used medically appropriately, the side effects of these medicines are often underappreciated. So those can include mood swings, irritability, depression, anxiety, difficulties with cardiac side effects, insomnia, other kinds of things. But then the biggest problem is when taken not under medical supervision, when casually taken in a way that people don't appreciate the downside, people get into real trouble.
Amelia, what have you found that these drugs are usually prescribed for?
Well, they're prescribed for ADHD, like you said, but I think one of the unfortunate problems with the misuse of these drugs is the possible issue that people who really need them for ADHD won't be prescribed them because there is some negative connotation around them, and we really have to be careful because what we're talking about is the misuse or non-medical use. The therapeutic use of them has real benefits to people with ADHD, as Mark could say, even with the known side effects and risks. The idea is to take it under a doctor's supervision and not to non-medically use the drugs.
And when you have ADHD and you're under a doctor's care, you don't get on a trajectory of necessarily getting involved in a lot of other drugs. Whereas if you're just an average kid and you've chosen this drug for my studying, this drug for my relaxing, alcohol when I want to party, you end up seeing these kids get involved in a trajectory of not just misusing the ADHD products, but abusing other substances as well.
So let's step back. What exactly is ADHD?
Well, ADHD is a condition that we've known about for several decades. It isn't well understood in terms of all its mechanism and all of the different subvarieties of it, but fundamentally, people have this condition onset in childhood. It differentiates them by having special difficulty with focus and attention and distractibility. And we've learned that these stimulant medicines, as well as other non-stimulant medicines, can help improve outcomes. As Amelia was saying, there's lots of good reason to prescribe it appropriately for the right people with the right monitoring. But lots of consumers out there might say, oh, well, I've had a problem with distractibility, or I've had a problem focusing, so I must therefore have this condition of attentionitis just because I have attention troubles, and so I must have ADHD. And why shouldn't I try a medicine? My cousin takes it, my brother takes it, the kid down the street takes it, or somebody sold it to me, or I noticed that like caffeine or other stimulants, it helps me concentrate temporarily. Why not? It's got this reputation of being a study enhancer, as we're talking about.
So those are reasons that you use as a doctor to prescribe it?
No, I use a medical diagnosis looking at a much broader set of criteria, looking at the trajectory of a whole person's life, not just their immediate complaint that, oh, it's hard for me to sit still in school. For example, are you bored? Aren't there other reasons why I might have attention troubles? Mm-hmm. And so it's important to use a much broader set of criteria and a much deeper set of criteria, not just the casual complaint of, oh, my grades aren't good enough.
Who are we seeing? Who is in this category of being prescribed medications, Amelia?
In the category of being prescribed or non-medically using?
Well, of being prescribed the ADHD medicine.
Well, I think as Mark pointed out, children usually have their onset of ADHD early on, and so people who are prescribed it typically have been prescribed ADHD medication since childhood, and it's about 5% of the U.S. population has a diagnosis of ADHD.
5%?
Cuts across socioeconomic strata, boys, girls, higher prevalence in boys.
Is it difficult to diagnose?
It's not difficult to diagnose when you follow the approach that Mark did, where you look at the whole child and you understand all the parameters there. But frequently what you'll see is a parent will bring a child in and say, my kid's grades have slipped, or my kid is fidgety, or I've heard that.
So a parent automatically thinks, wait a minute, I've got to do something to
And
stimulate.
it becomes very challenging for a lot of physicians then to push back against the patient. It's like the person who comes in and demands the antibiotics, even though the doctor knows they shouldn't have them. It kind of ends up in that very similar scenario. When we looked at the data, about 25% of kids believe that these could be used as a study aid. But the same study done among parents showed that about 33% of parents believe the same thing. So you've got this belief out in society that these drugs, while they are effective for ADHD, come with an additional set of benefits that maybe I want my kid to experience. And that is exactly the wrong way to look at medicine in any way, shape, or form.
So is it difficult for a doctor to say no?
It's very hard for doctors to say no. We get judged by our ability to please clients, to please patients in terms of customer satisfaction. There's the economic incentive of will they shop elsewhere if we turn them away. But our responsibility as physicians is to do things that are good for people, not just things that people will like. The example of antibiotics, the example of the dangers of prescription pain medicines. People come and have legitimate pain. That doesn't mean that opioid analgesics, which have a whole other set of side effects, including addiction and other difficulties, are the right way to go. Training a generation of doctors to be able to be a little bit more parentalistic about setting limits and framing the patient-doctor encounter in a healthful way as opposed to a consumeristic way is a difficult but very, very important thing for us.
I think it's important to train both physicians and parents to recognize that even though you may be having these symptoms that may look like ADHD, when you dig further down, the student could be having attention problems because he's using other things, because he's not getting enough sleep, because he's in the wrong class, the college level. So I think that Mark's approach to be very comprehensive in the assessment is important for physicians, but also it's important for parents to ask the right questions, because if they're just taking the problem at face value, my child has attention problems and therefore he needs ADHD medications, they're missing the point. They've got to look at the bigger picture.
So describe for me, who are we talking about? What would this child look like who has ADHD? Boy, girl?
Boys more common, girls as well. But I think I'd like to come back and stress a point that Amelia was making. Among the other causes of problems with attention are the use of substances and the loss of focus on academic achievement. And so doctors may not be as good as they ought to be about asking the question, What else are you using? Are you drinking? Are you smoking marijuana? Are you taking other substances? Are you staying up late and having attention problems because you're not getting enough sleep? Are you focused elsewhere? And the same kids that may be prone or vulnerable to looking for a quick fix through a so-called study drug are likely to be, with overlap, some of the same kids that have that other source of attention problems, that is, using other drugs. And I think we don't appreciate or look enough for that as an alternative source of the problem that needs to be addressed.
So who are these kids that are misusing these drugs?
Well, from a misuse standpoint, they run the gamut. You know, there are some who believe it's the high performers. They want to get into the best school, but the data doesn't always show that. It very well may be the average kid who has been going along at a trajectory in school and does begin to drink or ends up with a new set of friends, and the grades begin to slip.
So what age are we talking about?
We're talking about high school and college, really, is the
So
point where this
14,
behavior
15
occurs.
All the way up to 2021.
The
Exactly.
only group that appears to show an increase in the use of non-medical prescription drugs is 12th graders, seniors in high school. So that's the blip on the screen that we're concerned about. It appears to be stable or at least decreasing in the population among other ages, but among 12th graders, it appears to still be persistent.
And remember, you don't get ADHD when you're 17.
Exactly. Yeah.
But then does it increase as the child gets older, goes into college?
Well, we know
Or are you
that
seeing
the
the spike
rates-
right at
the rates or the prevalence is higher among college students than they are in high school. It increases with age and then it sort of tapers off. But in college, there are greater task demands. And I think a lot of students take more credits than they probably should be.
Especially in the beginning.
Exactly.
In the
That
beginning,
first year
and they
experience,
overload themselves, and it's a new environment. So one of the strategies that we advocate is to really rethink the idea of taking the maximum amount of credits that first semester, especially when you're in an unfamiliar environment. And
Away from home and everything
right,
else.
try to experience small successes, manage your time, get enough sleep, do the right things.
Is there a specific social economic group that is more prevalent or prone to having ADHD?
Not more specifically or prone to having the diagnosis, no.
But
I mean,
abusing it.
But from an abuse standpoint, it kind of runs into some degree, and again, you may have a little bit deeper data. It's on that college path, it's on that career path where academic performance at the high school and college level is vitally important to the future plans.
And that person may be more likely to have higher educated parents.
Yeah.
But it
So
isn't
it's all those
typically-
pressures that are weighing in there that would either drive the parent to guide the kid toward it, or very frequently the kid to choose on their own. I know somebody who's using these products. I'm going to try them, see if I get better outcomes in my perception. And frequently now we know the kid believes they help them, but it doesn't manifest in their grades. They don't get better grades. They may study more, but not study as well. They may feel more focused, but in fact they're more distracted. So it becomes this almost circular process of, I take the product because I think I'm doing better, but I'm not getting better outcomes, therefore I take the product.
So it brings us back to the question, how are these drugs being misused?
They're really, in some forms, they're being used, again, under the myth of the study drug, the idea that I have a big test or a big paper coming up, these will help me perform.
But how are
They're
the kids
also-
getting these pills?
Oh, how are they sourcing them? There is supply enough out there in society, in a high school, in a college, to be able to source the pills that they
So
need.
they're not prescribed.
Well,
You have a-
basically, a person with ADHD, a student who comes to high school or college with those pills, will divert those medications, and that's the most common source.
And so we understand what divert is. They are
They're
selling.
giving them away for
Giving
free
whatever.
or for low cost to a friend.
Well, mostly sharing,
Right.
thinking they're helping,
Yeah.
when in fact they're hurting.
Exactly. If you have a month's prescription, you can easily let a few go in a kid's mind. I can give some to my friends, help them out. They have a big test. That's how a lot of this happens.
How many kids are we talking about? Of 100% who are using these drugs, how many are diverting?
Well, anywhere from probably 20 to 60% of a group of people with an ADHD diagnosis might divert, and not continuously or regularly, but we don't really have too much data, but that's a fairly high proportion. So that's something that physicians want to monitor.
That's one of the really important points is when you prescribe for a young person the ADHD drugs, the physician has a responsibility to help the child and the parent as well understand these issues. You can't divert these. It isn't safe for you to give these to your friends. You don't know what the impact of this drug can be on your friend's heart rate or other conditions they may have. I've prescribed them for you because I understand you and I understand this situation. But now we've entrusted you with this product and you need to protect and safeguard it, not divert it. It's not okay. And that conversation, we feel, doesn't happen nearly frequently enough.
It needs to happen at the beginning, and it needs to happen in an ongoing way for ongoing monitoring.
Well, we can continue talking about that, and we will. And as we have learned over the years, young people decide to do drugs for various reasons, and sometimes for no reason at all. Sometimes they want to escape or just to be accepted. Well, you're about to meet one woman who wanted to have it all, a young woman, and it changed her family's life forever.
She was trying to be a good student, is what she was doing. She was trying to focus and maintain being in a school district that's academically aggressive, being in a family that everybody's pretty bright, just trying to keep up and not feeling maybe a sense of having the ability to do that completely.
Started with school-aid pills with Adderall, Ritalin. I believe I started because I wanted to maintain my grades. My first semester in 9th grade, I got straight A's. And it was fun for me. I enjoyed doing it. And as I continued to move through high school, there was a whole different culture that was in high school. There was partying on the weekends started, and meeting all new people, going from a school of 300 kids in middle school to 800 kids in high school. Your social life just increases vastly. And I wanted to be part of that and enjoy my high school years, but I also wanted to make sure I maintained my grades. I wanted to do the best that I could do in everything that I was doing. And the only way I knew how to do it without exhausting myself and being able to maintain the speed that I was doing it at was to take pills. I got them all through friends from all the way through high school. They're pretty much just floating the halls. If you talked to the right people, knew the people to get them from, it was not hard at all.
We had no idea that any of that was going on, absolutely none. A lot of it we thought was a normal teenage reaction of isolation, depression. When I say depression, I mean, it's not the bubbly self, just sort of kind of stuff, and sleeping late and that kind of stuff. So we didn't really think it was out of the ordinary.
They would see my report cards. My grades were good for them. I would do my shenanigans in high school, have, my friends over, go to parties on the weekends, but because of my grades, they weren't concerned about it. They thought it was just normal high school behavior. So there was no red flags that were raised for them, and if there were, my grades would calm their nerves about it. I was really looking for some Ritalin for my finals, and I couldn't find any, so I called this one girl who I thought would absolutely have a connection. I called her, she told me she did, but that they were different looking pills and they cost a little bit more. So I was like, I'll give it a shot, not a problem. It ended up being methadone. After the methadone, I got more into downers because I liked them a lot better, and because it made me feel like I was my normal self. Because I could, it would kind of slow me down enough to be able to sit down and focus and not be wandering my mind thinking about different things. I started to get more into pills, more into opiates of different kind, and the next step after that, you're going to pay $80 for 2 pills of Oxycontin, or you can go down the street and pay $10 and that'll last you 2 days for some heroin, and then that quickly rolls out of control into okay, $10, $20, $30, $40, $50 a day. I was up past that pretty fast. I would go in her room and see her doing lines of Adderall and Ritalin with her books in front of her. I was so gone at that time, I would kind of just chuckle to myself, oh, that's like a younger me right there, and so I wouldn't stop her. I wouldn't tell her that it was wrong. I'm like, oh, well, she's just trying to have her fun and do good in school because, she has a dream for herself too.
The daughter who passed away a half hour before she died, I actually said to her in the house, I said, I'm really starting to worry about you. You're starting to hang around with the wrong kids. And her answer, these were her last words, don't worry about me, Dad. I know what that crap does to people. And I believed her. And she looked normal. Everything was fine. And she went into her room and we were going to leave in half an hour to go do something. And when I went up to to get her, she was gone.
It was an overdose, a drug overdose. I can't tell you where she got the drugs. It was heroin, and I don't know how she took them. It was crazy. I had just gotten back from picking up with my friend, and because I was out of drugs, and I come back to the home and I'm too busy in the bathroom shooting up, trying to get my fix, that I couldn't even, hear my dad yelling, what's going on? Hold on, I'm in the bathroom. And, come to find out that she was in her room, her book's open, and not responding. It's the same day my sister passed away. She was in the hospital for 2 days, and I was still shooting up. I was shooting up in the hospital bathroom. So that day is my clean date. And I can't say I was still in my right mind, but I have not used since then. Only with new life can you understand death. And it's ironic how that happened, the death and my new life in the same day, and it really hits home for me because if I were to mess up, I could never get that clean date back. And that day is so significant for me that I'm gonna make sure it's written in my history.
I think when my daughter came out of the second rehab, as we were on our way to head her out west into a longer term program, she started crying in the car. She was really upset, saying, it's my fault that my sister died. And I yelled at her, of course it is. It's your fault, and it's my fault for not being there. It's your mom's fault for not being there. It's your brother's fault for not being there. It's your other sister's fault. It's the school's fault. It's everybody's fault. We all contributed. Nobody was there at that time, or however long it was where she was struggling with that. So yeah, it is your fault, but it's not all your fault. You always replay everything. You go back and you replay every little thing that you could have done better. And after you beat yourself up enough for that, you stop doing it.
We put them through a lot, and they've forgiven me, and they still love me and welcome me home, and it's beautiful. I don't deserve it, and I'm thankful and blessed that they would have me back in the family and did not write me off. I love life right now. I love everything I do. I love my family, my friends. I wouldn't trade my support for the world. And I kind of laugh at, my beginning clean self whenever I was first starting to get clean. Why was I scared for this? I can't tell you where I would be had I not taken my first drug, popped my first pill, but I would not be as sure about what I want to do and where I want to go with my life as I am now.
Wow, very touching. So what do you guys think about what you just saw?
Well, it's a very tragic story, but unfortunately it's one that we hear all too frequently, a similar narrative with some variations. One of the things we heard, I think, and was nicely illustrated, is how any use of non-medical prescription drugs, or the non-medical use of prescription drugs, can lead one step to another by normalizing the behavior. So if you are searching for the false holy grail of improving your performance, but then other things give you trouble, she described being up, being nervous, having insomnia, well then you look for downers to perhaps counteract that. And so now you're both into stimulants and into opioids, so stimulants and sedative hypnotics. So one step normalizing another and chasing the dragon and having trouble. Another thing that gets normalized is the behavior of being with deviant peers, because who are the people that are sharing these substances? Who are the people that you're enjoying them with?
She mentioned she was able to get this in school readily available.
Yeah.
So it's other people that are having similar difficulties, and what once seemed on the edge and unusual is now just the normal water that you're swimming in. Everybody doing a bunch of things that are going to be more and more dangerous, and then it's out of control, as she described.
Is this typical for kids who have been misusing prescription drugs to then move on and use other drugs?
Parents ask me all the time, is this drug a gateway drug? And that's a phrase that's popular in our culture, which really doesn't have any meaning. There aren't gateway drugs per se. It's almost as Mark said, there are gateway attitudes and beliefs, and there are gateway relationships. If I begin by misusing these ADHD products, I source them in my school, I begin to have a different relationship with putting drugs in my body, I begin to associate with different people in my school, and all of a sudden, you see in that clip, she said something when she used the methadone about she felt like herself again. And that is that, again, you begin on that trajectory. So it isn't that one drug leads to another, it opens you up to the potential that the person you source the ADHD drug from might be able to get you something else, or in this case, mistakenly recommend something to you, like they're a doctor and they know. You get in different situations where you are offered these different products, and you begin to manage your life differently. We did a study, it was all qualitative with kids around the country, and these were driven kids, and they talked about this. They'd say, I am not a drug user. I don't smoke marijuana. I do not drink alcohol. I am driven. I'm going to be something in this life. I take ADHD drugs when I have a big test, and to chill out on the weekend I might occasionally take a Vicodin. But I'm not a drug user. I'm doing this because I'm driven. And in their mind, they were getting the outcomes they were seeking. They were getting up when they needed to be up, and they were getting down when they needed to get down. And that is an absolute mistake.
Well, the father alluded to the fact that he thought that the kids were just being, this is typical kids.
Typical behavior.
Typical behavior.
That's a common problem in recognition, both by parents and by medical personnel. But it's really, really important for parents and the rest of us to take note when kids are having trouble and not just assume, oh, it's nothing but standard teenage trouble.
What could he have done differently, Amelia?
What could the parent
What
have
could
done?
the parents, yeah.
I really don't want to place any blame on the parent.
I understand.
I don't think that these things are just horribly tragic, and I think that we could do a better job of getting the information out.
Yeah.
I always feel responsible. I don't want to put the responsibility on that parent. That we
But
need
sometimes
to get
does a
this.
parent condone this by
Well,
wanting to
I
get
think
the better
parents-
grades?
Parents just don't realize that things can go from what they think is a benign behavior to something that's risky, to something that's dangerous, and things happen so fast that you really don't have any control over the situation. The drug is very powerful, and I think that these things are not benign in their early stages, and that's where we need to be better about seeing those early signs.
And it's very difficult for parents. That father, I think, articulated it beautifully. His kids were his kids. They were getting good grades. They were, maybe what you wrote off to normal teen behavior. What we hear from parents over and over again who have lost a child is they'll say, there was that point where I should have trusted my gut. I knew something wasn't the way it should have been, and I wrote it off. I thought I was overreacting. I thought it was just me, and I wish I could go back to that point in time. But the bottom line is exactly what Amelia said. It is very hard to raise a child. It is very hard when these substances enter their life to automatically, no light goes off, no warning sign goes off that your child has begun to do this. It's those very subtle things which we may or may not pick up on.
How big a problem is this? How many kids?
Well, what's really interesting about that question is that it's probably around 7 to 9% of
the
high
total
school
population?
Of
and
teens.
college students. But the perception is that maybe 3/4 of students are using them.
They will say everybody's doing it.
Everyone's using
It's
it.
not true.
So there's a huge gap between how many people are actually engaging in this behavior and how many people are doing
And
it.
perceived peer use is one of the major drivers for other kids. If they say, look, I think everybody else is using, these two are incredibly smart. Look at the grades they get. They must be doing it too, so I'm going to do it. And it's that perceived peer use, which is one of the major, regardless of what the drug is. Kids will say, everybody in school is smoking weed. Everybody in school is drinking. I'm the only one who's not, with the resignation that I'm going to need to start. A lot of what we sign to peer pressure is not these guys encouraging me to do it, but me putting that pressure on myself, that inner-directed peer pressure to say I want to fit in.
And it's also the incremental shift of what's normal.
Yeah.
If you're hanging out with deviant peers, well then of course it seems like everybody's
frame of
doing it.
reference.
Because your frame of
Exactly.
reference is this group is in trouble. It's not everybody.
So are you finding that parents are condoning this?
Unfortunately, sometimes yes.
Right, and all parents are well-intentioned. All parents want the best for their kids. So I think what is happening, and we've heard from our college students, is that the college students are coming home saying, I'm having difficulty studying, and the parents want to perhaps help them and condone the behavior, but the parents really aren't asking all of the questions and getting the complete story. They aren't saying, how often are you smoking pot and not going to class?
Well, could it be that a parent has an okay list of drugs and an un-okay list of drugs, and maybe what the kid is doing is in that okay list?
Well, I think the overlap, there's a huge overlap between the non-medical use and the use of other drugs. So there is really no dividing line. We're finding that these are the same kids. So,
And they blend one into another.
Yeah, so I don't think that there's very few kids who are only using non-medical prescription stimulants.
And Stan, to your point, increasingly with the permissive attitude about marijuana and even its so-called medicalization, people will say, well, marijuana, what's the big deal? That's not really a drug. That's not a bad drug. But we know that it's associated with academic impairment.
And that's what we found, is that typically the non-medical use is associated with declines in academic performance, and then these stimulants are used to compensate for poor grades.
And it's that compensation trajectory that parents
And
frequently miss.
unsuccessfully.
Yeah.
It's not like it helps, really.
Right.
And
Is
when
it
you-
gender specific?
Not really.
It's
No,
boys and girls. When we looked at the high school population, we saw about 25% of high school kids in America said that they believe these products could be used as study drugs, that they would give them better academic performance. When we looked at the parents of high school kids, we saw that number to be 33%. So only a quarter of kids, but about 30 to 33% of adults believe that their child could get better academic outcomes by using these medications, even if they didn't have an ADHD diagnosis. So you go back to what Amelia originally said, is we've got to back this up to the beginning of the continuum and really help people understand the risks of any misuse of these products. There is no appropriate way to misuse them. There's no margin of which you get away with it. You simply, if you do not have a diagnosis, these are one of the things you should not be taking.
Well, we have talked a lot already about the myth of study drugs, the problem of prescription stimulant misuse, and we have much more to talk about. But next, we're going to take a short break and look at a couple of new public service announcements. The partnership at drugfree.org, our partner for this program, has provided them.
I thought she was armed with all the knowledge that she would need to stay off drugs.
I would steal pills from my friend's mom.
We talk about all the common drugs, but never about prescription medication.
I was addicted to pills and I was living in a car. I stole a bunch of jewelry. I needed money for drugs.
Had I more knowledge about prescription drug abuse, I would have done things differently, yes.
Help save kids from prescription drug abuse. Secure your medications and talk with your kids. Visit drugfree.org.
Ronnie had huge dreams and aspirations.
When he got into the pill use, his mood changed, he changed.
He knew where he could go in the community to get pills.
Kids are getting them from your medicine cabinet.
He went downhill so fast, no one could save him.
He found his body in an apartment in Telford.
I never thought my son would take prescription drugs without a prescription.
Help save kids from prescription drug abuse. Secure your medications and talk with your kids. Visit drugfree.org.
And welcome back to our program, The Myth of Study Drugs, the problem of prescription stimulant misuse. Well, we've talked about the problems surrounding the myths of study drugs. Well, now we're going to turn our attention and start talking about possible solutions. What do we do about it? So how do we educate both the parents and the kids about appropriate and inappropriate use of ADHD drugs?
Well, I think, there's a number of levels. There's the mass society, there's a prescriber level, on and on and on, but it's really about helping folks understand overall, just like those two messages that just ran, that prescription medicines, when they're used or misused or abused in any way, shape, and form outside of a doctor's care, come with a host of risks. There's a reason why when you go to your doctor, they do a thorough history, they want to do tests, they want to understand the ins and outs before they prescribe that medicine for you, because they want to make sure there are no adverse effects. What we have when it comes to medicine abuse, and particularly on the ADHD drugs, is our kids prescribing for one another or kids prescribing for themselves. And you don't know, if you're a child with an ADHD prescription, if you give your friend a couple pills, whether or not they have a heart murmur or whether or not elevated blood pressure is a risk for them, on and on and on, and it can have unintended consequences. So the important thing to remember throughout this is we need to get more educational messages out there about prescription drug abuse. What happens in society is people say, I don't have any oxycodone in my house, therefore this is not my problem. But you do have two teenagers in your house, and the world will find them. So you need to think about this differently. We know from all of the research that's been done, kids who learn a lot about these issues at home from their parents are up to half as likely to use as kids who don't get that. So add this to the conversation that you're having with your kids when you talk about the cocaines and the heroines and the marijuanas, to make the point about prescription drugs and the risks that these can have. But then as a society, we really need a multifaceted approach. We need public education on a mass level. We need to be reaching out to parents and families. We need prescribers to be doing more with their patients. And it's going to require all of those different facets. But the key piece is that the prescription drug abuse problem in America, while the front page story of it is always the opioid abuse, there are literally dozens and dozens and dozens of different products which can be misused, and some of those, in fact, have great risk.
So let's talk about the prescriber. Mark, how do physicians fit into all of this? I mean, do they as a group understand the high rates of misuse of these drugs?
Well, there's a couple of things that we ought to be doing to improve the performance of medical staff about these things. So the first thing is, what are the appropriate patients to get stimulants for ADHD? How do we do patient selection? How do we do good evaluation? And how do we make that decision? And then the second area is, once that decision is made, how do we do a better job of managing and monitoring? So for the first issue, somebody comes in and says, I have an attention problem, a parent, a kid, both. And it's understandable that well-intentioned families want their kids to get every advantage, want their kids to do better if they have a difficulty. But we forget how reinforcing these stimulants are. They're reinforcing because of their basic pharmacological properties. The way they work is they stimulate a neurotransmitter in the brain called dopamine, which is directly linked into the brain's reward center. So whether you know it or not, it turns on the go signal. Anything that makes dopamine happen is something you want more of. That's number one. But the other thing is that they do actually, even if it's only for 5 minutes or a nanosecond, they do actually give you a jolt of energy, of attention and concentration. Just because that happens doesn't mean you have ADHD. Because you once took somebody's Ritalin or Adderall and it helped you concentrate for a moment doesn't make the diagnosis. That's just a normal pharmacological property of stimulant drugs, like if you had a double espresso. That doesn't mean you have caffeine deficit disorder. It means that that's what caffeine does, that's what stimulants do. But although they're so reinforcing, and although patients may subjectively be so sure, doctor, I know my body, this is what I need, you don't know, how can you tell me? This is, I know, the only thing that will help me. That doesn't mean they're right. And it also doesn't mean that there won't be unintended consequences and side effects beyond that immediate issue. So I usually have the conversation, right, you know your body, but why don't we pretend that one of us went to medical school and let's have a conversation about the other things in your life that could be causing this difficulty. Are there stressors? We've talked about time management, we've talked about interest, we've talked about boredom, we've talked about proper selection of academic pursuits. But are there stressors? Is there depression? Is there anxiety? Are there other diverting things that are causing inattention? So that's the one thing. Then the issue of once we've made the decision, you are a person who we should do a trial of stimulants. How do we manage that? How do we monitor that? I don't think physicians are looking carefully enough at concurrent substance use. Are we evaluating for marijuana, alcohol, other substance use? Are we drug testing, both at the outset and in an ongoing way? Because I think that that should be standard of care, doing drug testing to find out what the concurrent substance use is, because as we've talked about, it's that risk group that tends to get into trouble with the misuse of these stimulants.
Well, Amelia's been agreeing with you. Question, are people on college campuses, are they trained to recognize substance abuse?
I think that more and more colleges are understanding that this problem is affecting educational performance, and that is something that they're highly concerned about.
Are they just at the recognition phase, though?
No, I think that there's a lot of efforts at different colleges across the country to really try to tackle this problem in the right way, to do the right kinds of trainings for physicians and health center staff. But the one most exciting new idea is to really arm the people at academic assistance centers with better recognition skills, that when a person comes in and they're failing or their grades drop below a 2.0 and they have a mandated assessment, to not just put a Band-Aid on the problem and say, you need to have better time management skills, but try to look more carefully at the root of the problem. And one of the candidates for the root of the problem may be substance use. So we're not saying that all students who are failing in school have a substance use problem. They may have other issues going on, but to comprehensively assess whether or not substance use is part of that package and to get them to feel more comfortable about asking those questions and doing something about it once they find out.
Isn't this rather a sensitive issue for them to go and try and probe, ask those questions?
Sure, and that is the number one concern that we have heard among academic assistance professionals. I wasn't trained to do this. I'm not a clinician.
Not my job.
Right, it's not their job, but I think that what may be helpful is training them to recognize it and refer to someone like Mark or the health center or someone who has a more clinical approach, but to connect the dots for the student.
And don't ask, don't tell is not an effective intervention.
Right, and I think that one of the things that we find is that students want to perform really well. That's why they're in school. And they want their parents to be proud of them, their parents want to be proud of them. Everyone has this carrot in front of them. So let's leverage that. Let's say in order to do well in school, being drug-free is a better solution.
What about the parents? How do they fit in this? Are the students trying to impress their parents?
Oh, certainly. But I also think that, getting back to what we were talking about earlier, there are a number of strategies for parents early on in high school and even earlier that, in addition to all the drug-specific actions that a parent can take about speaking to their child about drugs and alcohol, they can monitor their activities. They can form a better relationship with their child so that they're more willing to talk to them about what's going on. They can disapprove of the drug use. In general, they can state that disapproval. And the other thing they can do is make sure that they themselves are role modeling prescription drug taking as a serious issue, taken only when completely necessary and under a doctor's care. So that role modeling is really important even early on.
And what parents have to understand when your child transitions out of high school into college,
and that's a big transition.
That's a huge transition for the child. You know, you're paying the bills and you're thinking about all that, but for your child, they've gone from being the top of the crop, now they're back at the beginning of the crop. They need to prove themselves. They're away from home. They're now responsible for their own health care through the Student Health Center. They're responsible for their own schedule. They're responsible in much larger ways for every decision throughout the course of the day. And you can have a great kid who has done great throughout their high school career and is presented with different options. So as Amelia said, it may be that your straight A student actually needs to take a few fewer credits that first semester so they get adjusted to school. You as a parent need to understand that while the university's told you about the great Student Health Center, that's not a replacement for the kind of quality of health care you were providing them and the family physician was providing them on a day-in, day-out basis. So it's not about being a helicopter parent in college, but you do need to check in. You do need to, you know, not just send them away and we'll see you at Thanksgiving and hope everything comes out all right, which unfortunately happens.
Yeah, but how does a parent supervise when you've got a student that is, you know, miles away?
You've got to do a lot of things.
What sources do you have?
You've got to weigh in. You've got to express your concern. You've got to ask the kind of right questions. You know, I mean, you know, a lot
Find
of
out about their friends who they're hanging out with, how they're spending their time, how they're spending their weekends, whether or not anything is coming up that's making them upset.
And one particular pet peeve I have is I think that college health services need to do a better job about communicating and involving parents when appropriate, rather than putting up a steel curtain of confidentiality and saying that these are independent operators when in fact they're not mature enough to do that without the help of parents when they're in trouble.
I think the other thing that parents can do and that students need to realize is that there's a lot of health promoting activities that are necessary to make it through school. And some of the things like getting enough sleep. These are not chemical substitutes for sleep. People think that they can burn the candle at both ends, not sleep, and then this will replace good sleep. It doesn't. Biologically it doesn't, and certainly behaviorally it doesn't. It's good to get into that habit of getting enough sleep, exercising, other stress reduction techniques, really socializing, reaching for help when it's necessary, having a good relationship with your doctor. There's all these things that you can do.
How about the transition from middle school to high school?
How is that? It's another big transition.
It's one of the most important ones in the substance abuse field. First of all, kids aspire upwards. So younger kids want to be like the older kids. But a lot of parents will say, my kid isn't in high school yet. I don't really need to deal with these issues. You actually need to be talking with your child, understanding their network of friends, understanding the temptations they have as they're making that late elementary school exit into middle school. Middle school is the sweet spot for really this issue. The average age of first use in America is around 13 and a half years old, which means there's a whole lot younger and a whole lot older. So, you know, it's almost about having an age-sensitive conversation, ratcheting that up. We know, again, you look at the data, 90% of all adults who have an addiction began with their use in their childhood years. Or said another way, which is very popular in our field, you get a kid from about age 10 or 11 to age 20 or 21 without having a problem with these products, not using marijuana, not drinking to excess, not smoking. They're very unlikely to have a problem with that later in life. So, you know, we've talked a lot about high school and college, but to your point, you really have to back this up to late elementary school. And it's not about, you know, having the big scary drug talk with yelling and screaming and all that kind of stuff. It's about a series of very small conversations. I almost call it like water torture. You know, asking, what are you going on? A starlet has a problem that's in the news. What do you think about that? Have the discipline to listen. If you do those little tiny things on that ongoing basis, it creates that perception in your kid's mind that my parents disapprove about this. They're aware and they're concerned about it. We know kids love to push their parents' buttons, but they won't push them that last step. All of those things become protective factors in the kid's life that cause them to make slightly different decisions as they move forward.
No, Steve, you're so right. It's a series of teachable or motivational moments. When are the appropriate times to bring it up and to get kids to be thoughtful about examining other peers who get in trouble? Well, why do you think that happened? Kids don't really want to be in trouble. Deviant peers are scary to them, and if you can set up a framework in which you give them alternatives that they can make choices that end up being safer, they'll usually do well. But you got to keep at it.
But they don't want to be in trouble, but yet they might say, well, listen, everyone is doing this.
And once again, it turns out that those are false expectations. Everyone's doing it in a deviant group,
Right,
but
we
it
need
really
to change
isn't
that.
everyone.
Yeah.
You need to help the kid understand. There may be in a school of 1,000 kids, and 1,000 kids are not all smoking marijuana every evening, and 1,000 kids are not all drinking every day. There are groups within that school that are doing that, and you'll see those groups. But that doesn't mean that is everyone, and it doesn't mean that's you, it's our family, it's your future to be engaging in those different behaviors. It's about, again, it all fits into that ongoing conversation, and as a parent, really having the discipline to listen to your child, not just always talking at them, but having a conversation with, or just putting something out there and listening to what they say. Somebody got arrested for something. What do you think about that? And in listening, they may say, you know what, it's too bad they got caught, because otherwise they weren't doing anything wrong. And as a parent, you've got to kind of process that and move along with that, so then you can come back with them and help them understand that. So what we tend to do as parents is kind of point counterpoint, like it's some cable TV show. You shouldn't do it anymore. It's really about that ongoing conversation, getting in tune with your kids. And as Amelia said, understand who your kids' friends are, understand who their parents are, and what are those different social contexts. And those are a lot of things that can give you those aha moments as a parent, I need to do something.
But I think one of the things that we're all reinforcing is that the non-medical use of prescription drugs is part of this larger drug problem. It can't be dealt with in isolation, and it's really part of the constellation of risk-taking behaviors that is so common among adolescents. They are inherently vulnerable to risk-taking because they have...
Because they're teenagers.
Yeah.
Because they're teenagers, and neurologically, their brains are wired for risk-taking and exploration.
So how does the use of study drugs in high school compare with other drug abuse?
Well, I mean, you know, alcohol and marijuana are certainly much larger in the 30 and 40 percentiles, whereas ADHD and prescription drugs are in the tens of percentiles. So, you see the bar chart on the screen. Marijuana blows them all away. But again, as Amelia said, this is part of almost the menu of things your child will be faced with. And as a parent, you can't say, you know what, I'm okay with marijuana and a little bit of alcohol and occasional study drugs, but don't do any of the other ones on the chart. It just doesn't work that way.
And so we have very clear data that taking a stance of non-permissiveness is most effective. Taking a stance of zero tolerance, that there's a bright line that you shouldn't cross, it's unsafe. At the same time, part of the difficult tightrope of being a parent is while you take that stance, you also know that they're likely to cross the line. And so you have to be able to do both things in a trick operation. I want you not to cross the line, but if you do cross that line, I'm not going to chop your head off when you come and tell me about it, because I want to keep a channel of communication open to be able to debrief and help you make a better choice next time. I need to have it both ways, hard as that is.
But isn't there a little bit of a tightrope for you as a doctor with your patients in terms of, do I prescribe, don't I prescribe, what do I do, and what medicines?
Sure, well, every medical decision point is like that. Even Tylenol can cause people's livers to fall off on the floor. So all of the medicines we use have potential as poisons. So one of the difficult things is to try to assess risk and benefit and make those difficult choices. And you get more than one chance. There's the outset. Do you prescribe for any particular condition, including stimulants for ADHD? But it's not just the outset, it's also ongoing monitoring. What are the side effects? Do you have troubles? Are we looking at blood pressure, for example? Are we looking at heart rate? I'm now talking about stimulants. Are we talking about mood effects, which are vastly underappreciated side effect profiles of these medicines? Do they cause anxiety for patients? Do they cause depression for patients? Do they cause irritability and anger and mood swings and insomnia? Are we monitoring those things, and are we looking at other drug use, and are we looking at potential for diversion? So those are the kind of the conversations we try to have to make it a better outcome.
And one of the common psychiatric disorders that's associated with the non-medical use of prescription stimulants is depression. And we're not really sure from the research whether or not the non-medical use is exacerbating an underlying propensity for depression, or whether or not it's really causing the depression. But we know,
the answer is it's probably both
probably
in different circumstances. It's both the chicken and the egg in different patients.
But when your son or daughter has depression symptoms, again, it may be a red flag for other substance use.
And I don't think we've said this, but in context of what you're saying is you need to look at substance use as a health issue First, Mark talks about that bright line. It isn't you cross the line and now you're a bad person or you're a lawbreaker, which is where this issue so frequently goes. As a parent, you need to look at substance use in your teenager and your college student as a health risk and manage it like you do any other health issue that faces your child. When you put that as your forefront of your mindset, it isn't about you'll go to jail, you'll be a bad person, what will the neighbors think, all of that kind of stuff. It's about protecting your child's health, protecting their future. You go into a different mode as a parent, because you've done everything for that child throughout their life. The well baby visits, the vaccinations, there's a sniffle where ended up in Mark's office, on and on and on and on and on. When it comes to substance abuse, it's kind of like, oh, you know, it's one of those things, they'll be okay, all kids go through it. You didn't say that about measles, you didn't say that about the flu. You really need to put it in that context. This is a health issue.
I think what helps is that when parents recognize that there is a connection to academic achievement. I really think that that's a lever.
Without a quick fix of another drug.
Because they are concerned about their kids' grades and their academic achievement, because we're living in a very different world where they'll need those skills.
And so the kids are equally concerned. The kids are equally concerned about their future as well. It's both the motivation for what we're talking about, but it's also something they care very intensely about, is are they going to be okay in the future?
And
so that's a good, malleable place to work.
And as professionals, we have to appreciate the pressures. Not just dismiss them and say they're bad parents. We have to say, listen, we know that these are tough times. We know that you're under considerable pressure. Here are some alternate strategies.
Well, we have reached that point in time in our program where I'm going to ask you for your final thoughts and give me with about, 30, 40 seconds what your thoughts are concerning our topic today of stimulants, of the study drug misuse. Amelia, I'll start with you.
I think that the most important thing to realize is that this is part of a larger problem of substance use during adolescence, and that there are things, luckily, that we know we can do. It's just a matter of implementing those strategies and being sustainable about those strategies. It's not about a one-time conversation or a one-time prevention program. It's something that you have to continually monitor and be vigilant about, whether you're a physician or a parent. You constantly have to be on your toes about this issue.
Steve?
I think following on that, as a parent, you have to understand that you actually do have power on these issues. You have the ability to have those conversations and be an authentic voice in your child's life. You have the ability to safeguard medicines in your home. You have the ability to do a lot around this. Understand your child's friends, understand their parents, understand their social situations. So a lot of times people will say, oh, this is just so tough. It's one of those things, I'm alien to my child's world. But again, we know kids who learn a lot at home, half as likely to use. Not pushing your parent that final step is a very important thing for a lot of young people. So as a parent, understand you've got that power. Have the conversations. It's not trite to say that, have a conversation. It actually does, in the data, show that it makes a difference. So you don't need to be an expert in pharmacology. You don't need to be Dr. Mark Fishman or Dr. Amelia Rea. You need to be this kid's parents and show their love for them, show that you care for them, and it actually is helpful.
Thank you. Dr. Mark?
Well, I'll just emphasize that as we started out at the beginning of the conversation, this really is a myth of study drugs. They have a popular conception as being for study, for enhancing academic performance. But the kids that are in trouble with them, the kids that are using them, are not kids that are using them in isolation just to go from a B+ to A-. It's the same kids that are using other things and are in trouble with a broad array of risk behaviors, including other substance use. So study drugs is a myth. We want to look at why kids are fooling with misusing a variety of substances that get them in trouble. The bad news is that it's bad for them. The good news is, as we've heard, there's lots we can do to help them. At multiple points, we can prevent, we can treat, we can change the course and teach them to do better.
Very good. Thank you. Well, that is all the time we have for today. Special thanks goes out to the partnership at drugfree.org for their assistance with this program. On behalf of Dr. Amelia Rea, Dr. Mark Fishman, and Steve Preserve, I'm Stan Rhodes. Thanks for watching The Myth of Study Drugs, the problem of prescription stimulant misuse.